Hello and welcome. Tonight, we take you on a journey back to the 19th century, to the long, candle-lit corridors and echoing halls of a grand Victorian manor. But we won't be visiting as guests, nor as lords or ladies. Instead, we'll be entering quietly through the back door and descending the stairs to where the servants lived and worked and rarely rested. We'll explore the daily life of the people whose labor kept the great houses running, whose hands scrubbed and carried and polished, whose names were sometimes never even spoken aloud. Life as a Victorian servant was no fairy tale, but it was a life of strict routine, endless work, and strange, quiet dignity. Let us begin at the beginning of the day. The servant's day did not begin with sunlight. It began with darkness. Long before the gentry stirred, long before the cock crowed, the first to rise was the scullery maid. She was often the youngest and lowest ranked servant, a girl of 13, perhaps 14, bundled in a coarse dress, her hands red from cold water. She would wake around 4:30 in the morning. No alarm clock, just habit and fear of being late. Her first task was to light the kitchen fire. She would remove the ashes from the night before, kneel on cold stone, arrange the kindling, strike the flint until the first embers glowed and the kitchen began to warm. From there, her day unfolded in quiet labor, washing pots, scrubbing vegetables, hauling coal. But she wasn't alone. Soon after, the rest of the household began to stir. The housemaids, the footman, the butler, and the cook. Each had a role to play, and every movement at its place. The housemaids would begin by cleaning the drawing rooms, dusting, wiping soot from fireplaces, emptying chamber pots. This had to be done silently before the family awoke. No loud footsteps, no broken china, no signs that they had ever been there. By 7 a.m. breakfast preparations began. The cook, an older woman, often stern, ruled the kitchen like a captain. Recipes were memorized, not written. Meat was wrapped in muslin. Eggs were candled by hand. Meanwhile, the footman, tall, well-dressed in livery, polished silverware, and laid the table. They stood straight. They moved quietly. Their appearance mattered more than their opinions. The butler, a figure of solemn dignity, oversaw all. He managed the wine cellar, the dining room, the male servants, and he knew everything about everyone. He did not gossip, but he listened, and he watched. Life in the manor was divided by invisible lines. The family lived upstairs, the servants lived below. The two worlds were close in space, but distant in feeling. Servants used back staircases. They knocked before entering. They never spoke unless spoken to. They addressed the mistress as ma'am, the master as sir, and bowed their heads when passing them in halls. There were rules, unspoken and strict. A parlour maid might spend hours arranging flowers. A footman might spend a day polishing doorknobs until they gleamed like mirrors. A lady's maid would help her mistress dress, lace her corset, brush her hair 100 strokes. But she was not a friend. She was a shadow, a presence without identity. Downstairs, servants shared cramped rooms. Beds were narrow, sheets were scratchy. Privacy did not exist. Yet there was pride in their work. Some served the same family for decades. They knew the house better than its owners.
By mid-morning, the great house began to wake. Upstairs, doors opened, bells rang, and footsteps echoed faintly above the plaster ceilings. For the servants, this meant a shift in pace.
The early tasks were done. Now came the daily rhythm of responding to every need of every resident. The breakfast bell would ring. Footmen, straight-backed in gleaming shoes, would carry silver trays up long staircases. Porridge, tea, boiled eggs, nothing too heavy. That came later. While the family ate, the lower servants ate too, but not the same food and not in the same room. In the servants' hall, they sat in order of rank. Cook near the head, housekeeper just beside her, then the butler, and so on down the table. The scullery maid last to sit, if at all. The meal was plain, porridge or bread, weak tea, salted meat if lucky. No one lingered. There was too much to do. After breakfast, tasks divided like clockwork. The parlour maids began dusting china cabinets. Housemaids polished brass rails and balustrades. Footmen brushed shoes and recreased trousers. The hallboy emptied ashes, the kitchen maid peeled potatoes, and the laundry maids began their steamy, endless chore. Laundry day was relentless. Boiling linens in giant coppers, hauling water, scrubbing with lye soap, rinsing, wringing, hanging, ironing. No machines, just muscle and time. Cleanliness was next to godliness, at least for the family upstairs. Downstairs, it was harder to come by. Water was hauled in buckets. Baths were rare. Servants washed at basins. Cold water, no privacy, no luxury. Yet appearances were everything. Shoes must shine. Aprons must be white. Hair must be neat. The house must sparkle, even if the servants' shoes were falling apart beneath their shine. Everything must be perfect, even when nothing was easy. Floors were scrubbed on hands and knees, mirrors polished with vinegar and newspaper, silver buffed until the servant could see their own tired face in the reflection. By afternoon, the air in the house grew still. The family might go for a walk, ride out in a carriage, or host tea. For the servants, this time was not restful. If guests arrived, there was preparation. If children needed supervision, a nursemaid or governess was close by. If nothing else, there was always something to clean. The bell system, a series of wires and pulleys, kept everyone alert. Each bell corresponded to a room. When it rang, a servant read the label and rushed to answer. They could not be late, nor forget, nor speak out of turn. Some houses had dozens of bells. A constant chorus, never musical, just mechanical and commanding. As afternoon turned to evening, the manner shifted once more. Gas lamps were lit, candles replaced daylight, curtains were drawn, and the household prepared for supper. Supper, in the Victorian manner, was not a quick affair. It was a ritual, a performance, and it required a great deal of silent labor. The cook worked quickly, commanding her assistants to season, to chop, to garnish. The meat roasted to perfection. The sauces stirred and strained. Footmen set the long table with military precision. Every fork and knife placed at exact angles. Each wine glass glistening like crystal. The butler oversaw the wine decanting, allowing it to breathe as the clock struck 7. Upstairs, the family dressed. Servants helped with corsets, cufflinks, cravats. The lady's maid ensured her mistress's hair was flawless. The valet pressed the master's dinner coat. The dining room filled with laughter and conversation. Downstairs, it was quiet. Servants waited in shadowed corners, ready to refill a glass, ready to serve the next course, ready to disappear at a moment's notice. They were present, but invisible. Once the family's supper ended and the dishes were cleared, the servants could finally eat. Their meal was simple. Stewed vegetables, leftover meats, thick bread. It was eaten quickly, but together, this was their moment to sit, to breathe,
to speak in quiet tones. Stories were shared, letters read aloud, jokes whispered when the cook wasn't listening. It was a brief pause in a long day, but not the end. After supper, there was still work to do. Chamber pots to empty, fires to bank, ashes to carry, boots to polish for morning. The scullery maid again knelt before the hearth, cleaning the day's dishes. The hall boy checked that all the lamps were out, every candle snuffed, every curtain drawn. The butler secured the wine cellar. The housekeeper locked the linen press. Each servant knew their task. It was done without complaint, without pause, without being asked. The house grew still. Late at night, when the great house was silent, the servants crept to bed. But not to soft mattresses, not to feather pillows, not to peace. Most shared rooms, small, dark, windowless spaces, a single wash basin in the corner, iron bed frames that creaked. They undressed by candlelight, wore nightshirts handed down from older siblings, folded their aprons, tucked them neatly beneath their pillows. They did not stay awake long. Sleep came quickly, out of exhaustion, but even in sleep, they did not rest completely, for the next morning would begin again before dawn, and the bells would always ring. Not all servants were treated the same. In the world below stairs, there was a strict, unspoken hierarchy. At the top stood the butler and the housekeeper. They were senior staff, often older, trusted, respected. They answered only to the master and mistress of the house. The butler managed the wine cellar, the dining room, and the male staff. He carried keys to valuable cabinets and rarely showed emotion. The housekeeper, sometimes called Mrs., even if unmarried, managed the female staff. She oversaw cleaning, linens, supplies. She was the keeper of domestic order. Next came the valet and the lady's maid. They served their master or mistress personally. They helped them dress, delivered messages, and handled delicate matters. Below them were the footmen. Tall, often chosen for appearance, they served at table, opened doors, carried trays. They wore powdered wigs in earlier decades and knee breeches with gleaming shoes. Their work was highly visible, but largely decorative. Then came the maids, parlor maids, housemaids, scullery maids, nursery maids. Each had her role, each knew her place, and at the very bottom, the hall boy, just a boy, sometimes 12 or younger. He emptied chamber pots, ran errands, swept steps, and was often scolded by everyone. Each rank had their own tasks, their own privileges, their own tiny space in the pecking order of the house. Even below stairs, society was everywhere. Let us pause and look more closely at two figures. One, the lady's maid, and the other, the butler. The lady's maid was discreet, observant, always near but never in the way. She dressed her mistress, washed her hair, mended her gowns, helped her write letters. She knew everything, every secret, every fear, every affair. Yet she said nothing. Her job was to be invisible. She was not a friend. She was not family. She was indispensable. And then there was the butler. He did not dust. He did not cook. He did not gossip. He stood, watched, directed. He answered the door, poured the wine, handled the money. In many ways, he ran the house. He knew the wine pairings. He set the dinner sequence. He remembered every guest's name, even if they never noticed his. He aged with grace, rarely married, often served in one house his entire life. At night, when all were asleep, the butler walked the halls, checked the locks, secured the cellar, listened to the wind. Despite the labor and the hierarchy and the silence, Servants were human. They laughed, they sang, they wept in basements, and they dreamed. Sometimes, in the hush of early afternoon, when the master was out and the children were napping, a housemaid might hum a song from her village. Sometimes, a footman and a kitchen maid might share glances or notes left in the pantry. Forbidden romances bloomed beneath stone staircases, whispers in back hallways, a touch, a look, a stolen moment. But romance was dangerous. If discovered, it meant dismissal, shame, poverty. Some servants fled together, others married and left service. Some stayed and buried their longing deep. And occasionally, there was rebellion. A broken plate, a slammed door, a girl who simply walked out into the night, never to return. But more often, there was quiet endurance, because for many, there were no other options. The work was hard, but it was steady. The house was cold, but it was shelter. The mistress was cruel, but the streets were crueler. So they stayed, day after day, year after year. And through it all, they found moments of peace. A sunrise through the scullery window, a warm roll from the oven, the laughter of another maid in the servants' hall. Tiny lights in a world of shadows. Even servants had holidays. Not many, not often, but a few. Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, was one of the rare moments when servants received gifts. Small boxes of coins, old clothes, sometimes a leftover goose leg wrapped in cloth. The day might begin with cheer, but even then, chores waited. Some houses gave servants a half day off to visit family. Others did not. There were other special occasions too. Easter, harvest suppers, weddings, not their own, but those they served. And sometimes a mistress might reward loyalty with a coin or a smile. But kindness was rare, and illness was more common. When a servant fell ill, they might rest for a day, maybe two, but if the illness lingered, they might lose their position. There was no sick leave, no pension, no doctor, unless the master provided one. Servants grew old, just like anyone. Some stayed in service until they died. Others were dismissed when they could no longer keep up. A few lucky ones became retired retainers, given a small room and allowed to live out their days in the attic or the garden cottage. But many more ended up in poorhouses. For most, there was no retirement, just less strength, and then nothing. Some left service by choice. A young housemaid might marry, a footman might emigrate, a scullery maid might run away and never look back. But most served until they couldn't. Their departure was quiet. A farewell handshake, an envelope with a reference letter, sometimes a few coins, pressed into their palm. And then a walk down the gravel drive and away. If a servant died in the house, they were mourned. Briefly. The family might attend the funeral, or send flowers, or say something kind, just once. But the work continued. A new maid arrived. A new name appeared on the roster. The house did not stop. Their memory faded into the bricks, into the wood grain of the banisters, into the soot of the fireplace. Their fingerprints remained on the silver they once polished, on the staircase rail they once cleaned, on the floorboards they scrubbed every day. They were never famous, but they were everything. The house could not stand without them. The family could not live without them. And yet, the world barely noticed them. So now, as we prepare to close our eyes and drift away, we remember them. The men and women who lived below the floorboards, who rose before the sun, who carried trays and filled bathtubs, who pressed linens and opened doors, who worked and worked and worked, silently, faithfully, for lives not their own. They were born into labor, and they made it into something noble, a polish on silver, a lace curtain straightened, a fire lit before dawn. Not for fame, not for glory, but because it had to be done. Let us remember that every grand story is built on quiet hands. And now, as the halls fall silent, as the candles gutter low, and the bells cease to ring, may you rest as they once did. Wrapped in wool blankets, tired but content, knowing the work was done. Thank you for drifting through time with us. Good night and sweet dreams.